If you've been sending cold emails to 150 plus investment bankers because that's what the guides tell you, you're actually hurting your chances here in Europe. That's because that's the US playbook, and it actually works against you here in Europe. In this video, I'll break down why the standard US networking playbook fails here in Europe and what you should do instead. And all with the same goal in mind, landing that role, but with a different method entirely. I'm Nico. I spent close to 5 years in large cap M&A in Zurich, 3 of which I was the recruiting captain, meaning I screened CVs, I conducted interviews, and I sat in the room and decided who gets the return offer and who doesn't. I saw how candidates come across to us, the ones who stood out for the right reasons and the ones who got flagged for the wrong ones. And high volume outreach was one of the clearest signals that you just don't understand how the European market works. Because investment banking in European countries is a very small world and people talk. Often your reputation lands before your CV or email even does. But let me show you now what this means in practice. First, why does the US playbook fail here in Europe? One obvious structural difference is that Europe is broken down into different countries, each with their own financial sector and own recruiting nuances. But also the US is a way bigger market with spring weeks and also bigger intern and analyst classes, meaning there are just way more opportunities to break into that industry. So a high volume outreach approach, it really fits that big funnel of the US investment banking landscape. In Europe, let's look at Switzerland for an example. At a company which is huge like UBS, it has maybe headcount for about 5 to 6, 7 analysts per year. That means the entire investment banking landscape has about 100 junior positions to fill per year. And that's a tiny number if you consider that there are still thousands of applicants per year to fill those 100 slots. And I calculated it, that means less than 1% of all applicants on average get accepted to an internship role, and about 50% of those ultimately land the return offer. And now let's compare Switzerland, or also France and Italy, to London and Frankfurt. In London and Frankfurt, you have a spring week, which you usually do in the early years of the bachelor to get fast-tracked into the summer internship assessment centers. In France, Switzerland, and Italy, those typically don't exist, and everything works on an off-cycle basis, meaning there aren't any flagship centralized summer internships, but it all works off-cycle across the year. And on top of that, in these small markets with a less structured recruiting process, your reputation really matters a lot because it's such a small market, everyone knows everyone, meaning your reputation, if good or bad, it usually lands on their desk before your CV even arrives there. And that means this high volume outreach approach of sending hundreds of cold messages per week to all the investment bankers, it just doesn't work in Europe the same as it would in the US. And that brings me to what I call the shotgun problem. And that's sending the same message, copy pasting it, and like a shotgun, shooting it within one bank to every single investment banker. That's the wrong way to do it because typically 1 to 2 key people of that team are in charge of the recruiting process, meaning that they will be forwarded all of these emails within a span of like 2 minutes if you just copy pasted it to all of them. And that makes them feel less important. And it also shows them that you didn't do any attempt at customizing your message and really understanding the different bankers in that team and who you might be able to connect with. So what you need to do in Europe is you have to flip it around. You need to select a few bankers within each bank, ideally across the hierarchy levels. You can do 1 to 3 people, and you really study the specific bankers and the teams to come up with a personal note to them. But you're probably wondering, where do you even get started? The easiest place to get started with this is at your university, at on-campus recruiting events, because the banks literally are coming to the university to meet you and see if you are a potential fit for their team as an intern or a full-time hire. And that comes in different shapes. So it can be a guest lecture or someone basically coming to do a presentation. It can be case studies, case competitions, or even full-blown assessment days or mock interview session. Be sure to check if there are any upcoming events at your university and sign up for them. One note here though, is they do track attendance, and if you just decide to not show up without telling them, they do take note of that that, and it might come back to haunt you later. But let's take a step back. Why do you even need to reach out to investment bankers, meet them, and do networking? In my experience, there are three main reasons why. First is information seeking, second are referrals, and third are friendships. So information seeking means you want to get more information about their team, the bank, the location of the office, just the culture itself, and if that ultimately is a place for you. And all of this information you can recycle, reuse in your own interview. So you really need to make sure that you ask concrete questions that can help you once you're sitting there in that interview seat. Second are referrals, meaning that you have your foot in the door because someone within that team, or ideally more than one person, can vouch for you. They can say, look, I've met this person in a coffee chat, I've spoken to him or her at an event, and I think they would be a great fit for us. Let's invite them at least to an interview. They can't get you further than the first round interview, but in European markets, especially the smaller ones, which are not London and Frankfurt, with more sort of informal recruiting processes, they can get you all the way to that first round interview. And third, and most important, is the long game, or the friendships and relationships that you build. And this helps you over the years to come. Think of it like this. You met an investment banker at a coffee chat, you bonded over a common hobby, for example, jogging, and you then prepared together for a marathon. You bonded in a way that no one else could. That means that, let's say 10 years down the line, that investment banker switched to the client side and is now CFO. You are an investment banker, you are, let's say, a director. You are looking for a transaction and you hear that your friend is now selling a division. Who will that friend likely give the transaction to? The investment banker he knows very well because you have shared interest, you've spent years communicating with each other, or to some stranger who just pitched him the transaction. And that's exactly what your network is for. It's to be used. You help others out without expecting anything in return, but down the line, you will get that payback sooner or later. And you can guess it. You can't build such a deep bond with every investment banker, no, nor with 100, 200 different bankers. So it's much more powerful if your cold messages, your cold outreaches are very targeted to a few people that you've researched and you understand where your common interests or your common background might lie. This can be across the full investment banking landscape because cross banks, people don't talk that often. They do. I did with my colleagues at Bulge Brackets. For example, if I was interviewing a former intern of a colleague at the bank across the road, I called him up and just asked him for some informal feedback. But in general, they don't talk as much as within one bank, within one team. So you can spread your messages across the banks, but just don't fall into the shotgun trap within one specific team. And remember, one real and deep conversation with an investment banker, it beats 50 cold messages and it beats 10 high-level chats with people you shared nothing in common with. But of course, you somehow have to get in front of those investment bankers. And if you can't do that via the on-campus event or via your own network of friends and family, then yes, you need to send them cold messages on LinkedIn or email. And there are a few things that you need to keep in mind, especially things that you should not do. I'll also show you a few examples which are good and bad now then. So on the don't side, do not send them a huge message which no one has time to read or no one wants to read. Don't just copy paste stuff and send it to everyone. Again, that's the shotgun approach, but also just shows that you didn't personalize even the slightest bit of the message. And third, don't send a message without a specific ask. Don't just send a message for the sake of sending a message. Instead, make the message short, make it personalized with something about that person, ideally a common background or common shared interest, and try to make it memorable. I, for instance, got 10 to 20 LinkedIn messages per week, and only the ones that really stood out from the way they wrote to me and their profile, it's always a combination. Those are the ones I ultimately met for a quick coffee chat. Let's look at a few examples. So this one, for instance, it's way too long. If I get such a message with such a huge block of text, I'm honestly not even going to read it because I just have too many emails and too much stress in my life to take these 30 seconds to read such a comprehensive email. Or this one, it's simply copy paste. You can tell the person didn't even look at my profile. He or she just copy pasted this message to probably 10 or hundreds of different bankers. Again, such an approach might work in the US because the funnel is just so much bigger and there's just so many opportunities that one or two of these messages might stick and you might get the coffee chat, and then you can prove yourself with your personality. But in Europe, you just don't have so many shots, so you really need to target the people and not just copy paste it to all of them. And here's a last example of how not to do it before I show you some good ones. It's sending a message just for the sake of sending one, without a clear ask at the end. If you don't have a clear ask, then the banker has no reason to reply, or might just reply with a thank you or good to connect, and that doesn't help you, and it's just one more message you need to send, asking them for a coffee chat or asking them for more infos on their team or the recruiting process. And it's again one more reason for them not to reply in the second message. But now let's look at some good examples. This one here is very short and personalized. You can see we mentioned the common shade background, and we do it in a very natural way. We don't just say it stood out to me, because every candidate does that. And it has a clear ask with a very low barrier to say yes to. We're just asking for a 15-minute chat, and that's very hard to say no to. And at the very end, we mentioned that we want to hear about their experiences, again tying that to your shade background, showing that it is personalized to their specific situation because it's similar to yours. And here's one last example to make it very memorable. It is very edgy, I do admit that, so it's not for every type of person. You really need to tailor these to your personality, because you don't want to be a different person on paper to in person. For example, during the World Cup, if you open with a line about a match that just happened and you can guess that that person is probably into football, again, you do that by researching them, understanding their background and seeing if that could be a fit, then this is definitely one message that that banker will never forget. And if you can provoke some small emotion on their end just with a message, making them smile, this is already a very good sign and will increase the odds of you getting a reply and a coffee chat with them. Okay, now let's assume the cold message landed, you arranged a coffee chat, and you meet the investment banker. What do you do now? In the conversation, one general rule of thumb is make that investment banker, make that person the subject. You should do about 20% of the talking and let them do the remaining 80%. And the main reason is because you want them to feel important and you want to get the most information you can out of them. Okay, let's quickly recap how to network in European investment banking. So first, understand it's a very different market to the US. It's much smaller, with different countries that have their own processes and their own nuances, which you need to understand. That means it has a smaller funnel and you cannot just do a mass outreach approach. You need to target specific bankers and really research them to come up with a more personalized message or personalized discussion when you meet them. And all of this networking gets you relevant information, it gets you the referrals and long-term relationships and friendships that ultimately help you out to land that job and stay in the role. And that's networking in Europe. And if you're currently applying for investment banking roles across Europe, make sure to check out this video and avoid these 5 mistakes before you send that application. And also feel free to use my free CV template, and you can find the link to that in the description below. And if you enjoyed this, then hit the subscribe button and I'll see you in the next video.